best books for men. And these lists that you probably see online are always the opinion of that specific man. I just want to mention this caveat because I think some books are more important to a man versus others because of their own individual experience. And with that individual experience and how you grew up may affect what book matters more. And this list is dynamic, which means it changes. With time, I'm pretty sure after I have children, because of that experience, the books that matter more will change. So this list is as of December 2023, where what I've experienced so far in the 33 years of my life. So let's just start. So number one, and this is something that has come to me for the last year, has been the Bible. God, He's the ultimate Father, King of Kings, and a lot of what we read and listen to and self development. If you're watching this, you're probably into that world. Um, Well, most self development comes from the Bible. I've been reading it, not as much as I'd like to. I definitely need to read it like on a daily basis. I read it a few times a week at best. Um, but I do have an app, so if I want to look for a specific verse, just Google. It's like Google for the Bible. Just find the verse that I need at that given moment, whatever I'm going through to um, read through and kind of help me out, meditate on. And the Bible has all the self help tools that most people just take and revamp in a sense to present day, which makes sense. Um, so it's the original self development tool. And I think as a man, it's a great book to always have by your side. You just don't read it from cover to cover. What's the meaning of these verses and passages and things like that? And the stories behind these people that lived during those times and why they wrote about this person who walked the earth and had these godly powers. Um, I think is pretty cool. And as a man, I think it's one of the most important books you'll read because you'll get to see that there's a father beyond your 3D physical realm father, uh, and he wants what's best for you, type of thing. So, the Bible, number one. If you're not religious, I still would read it because there's so much good and useful just life advice in the book. So, highly recommend it. Number two would be a book that I read. One of the first books I read when I really started getting into books was The Way of the Superior Man. And for the main reason is The Way of the Superior Man made me realize the most important aspect of relationships between men and women, and that's polarity. And while the book really has this idea and really taught me the idea of like there's masculine and feminine, their energies are not specifically a biological structure, right? Like the man is a biological structure, the woman is a biological structure. Instead, it's energy. And in the book, he's basically saying we all have both. And because of biology, you lean more one side energetically because, as a man, it's testosterone. As a woman, is estrogen and progesterone and some other hormones that are really high compared to what it would be in a man. But we still have those too as men. We still have estrogen, we still have progesterone. And depending on where you're at in your life, they raise. And when you have kids, testosterone dips, the others raise because you need to be more caring. And it's a biological experience. Um, so the way of the spirit really taught me that we all have both. And through certain situations and scenarios, you may need to utilize one more so than the other. So one of the most important books I read in understanding that so that I don't go off the rails. Number three is Wild at Heart. It I read this book about 2 years ago, and it blew my mind. I mean, the things he was saying. I mean, he is a Christian, John Eldridge, so he does utilize a lot of verses and Bible, um, references. So if you don't want to read the Bible, it's a great book to read where he doesn't like force it on you, but he utilizes the stories and the verses to really make a point about what it is to be a man, and like how it is we have all this energy, and like society kind of like pushes it in, and that it's a beautiful thing that we do have this. And he talks about being a boy and why most boys are unsuccessful in school, in the school system, because we're meant to play and roll around and tussle, and it's built into our biology, and we try to ignore it because it's dangerous. But this is why I love jujitsu. And while that heart really made me see that, I also made a podcast kind of summarizing the book and going over my notes quite some time ago. If you search my name and search it, it should come up through my podcast. So you can look at the podcast playlist that I have. Number 4 is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. One of the important books that I read, I think now, like 10 years ago. And it allowed me to get a sense and better idea of energetically, as a masculine man, there are pillars to the masculine man. And depending on where you're at, you may utilize one of those pillars. Maybe you're in the king era of your life where, everything is kind of working in your favor. You have a great relationship, you have children, you're a creator, and like you have a good job, and you're bringing value into the world. And you're going out there and you're tackling things, and you're saying no, you're being assertive, you're telling folks what to do, right? Like being in a king era is a great place to be, and that's what we're kind of all working on. But certain times of your life, you may be a warrior where you're just working nonstop, you're putting in the work, you're constantly like you're going into battle every single day. Or maybe you're in your magician phase where you're like kind of taking a step back. You're the strategist. You're utilizing your creativity. You're understanding the battle mechanics and helping others and navigating um, what they need to do. Maybe that's being in a leadership position at a company or owning your own business, and you go from salesperson, because all of us start as a salesperson in a business. You go from salesperson to manager, and you're managing the salespeople. So a magician is one of those people, and then you have your lover, which is the relationship side of things. But it's not only relationship; it's just like how you care and of in service to the world and to other people. And there's dark sides and light sides to each one. Um, and I always go back to the book because it is a lot. Like, I mean, every pillar has multiple forms of how that person can show up in the world. And as you read it, you start realizing, people in power are so far into the tyrant king, which is one of the dark sides, but there's also other sides to it. There's also boy psychology and man psychology in the book, so it breaks it down into two areas, and they're utilizing Carl Jung's work to kind of make this point. There's a lot to it, but it's a small book, and something that I go back to about every year or every other year, so highly recommended. Number 5 would be Fathered by God. Now, Fathered by God was a book I read last year, and late last year, and it was one of the books that really made me cry. It really like brought tears because it was talking about it. It was good. It's a good book for folks who maybe didn't grow up with a father physically there, like myself, or you had a father that was maybe there physically, but he wasn't there emotionally for you. He was barely around, maybe, and when he was around, maybe he was glued to his TV or something, and didn't really spend time with you. Um, didn't say good job when you did good on that test in school, or maybe he was there. He went to some of your games, but not all of them because he was always working, whatever the case may be. And he really showcases that we've always had a father. And again, it's John Eldridge who wrote Wild at Heart, so he does utilize a lot of biblical references. He talks about God, but it's such in a beautiful, poetic way that it really affected me. I think it's one of the most important books a man can read, and understanding that no matter if your father's there or not there, um, it's just understanding that we have an overarching father that's always there, and that we can speak to him at any time through prayer. Um, so, yeah, recommend it. If you're not religious, still recommend it. Number 6 is Iron John. Iron John utilizes a mythical story to kind of talk about how boys turn into men. And what I love about the book is that it takes this story of Iron John, which is a short story, it's not a long story, but it takes the story and kind of breaks down what is going on to the boy and eventual man later, and how he meets um, this John, this wild man, and talking about like this is a side of us that we don't get to nourish or get to showcase. So it's very similar to Wow That Heart in a sense, but utilizing a mythical story, which I think is more powerful. Stories have always been the most powerful in human history to to exemplify a point. So Iron John, not going to say much. I highly recommend reading the book. I've read it like 3 or 4 times. I've also listened to it while I read it, just to get a better sense of Boys and Men. More recent book that utilizes data to show where we're at as boys and men and where we're going, and it's not looking too good. Um, there's men in power, obviously, that have, you know, kind of created the world that we have today, but that's not going to look the same in the next 50 to 100 years, because of what's happening to boys and men right now with the advent of technology, and that we have to use our hands less. We're, our value is diminishing, and we know that. And unfortunately, it's creating a generation of boys that are just opting out of everything. You know, they're living with their parents longer. They're opting out of college, which means they're opting out of the workforce, and they're not moving much. Not only that, but there's higher rates of suicide and depression. And the numbers aren't looking too good, but the book really gives you an idea and kind of strategy of what Richard Reeves, the author, is looking to in the future, and ways we can prevent this from getting worse right now, because the numbers may not seem big. At least to me, they didn't seem too big. They're like, oh, 15% or 20%. I mean, the college one is big. Like, it's like over 50% of men are just not going to college. I think most colleges are inching towards 60% female, 40% male. And that number continues for women going up and for men going down. So things like that. And it's a great book utilizing data, the most recent data, and it's a timely book. So I definitely think it's something that has to be read now. There may be updated and revised versions in the future, but it's definitely something to read this day. 8 Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. It's a classic book on relationship dynamics and understanding what it is like to be a man and what it is like to be a woman, and how our brains are very different and why we need each other. So, very basic, very simple. Number 9 is a philosophy book, Stoic philosophy, on Marcus Aurelius's writings, meditation. He was called the Philosopher King. He's probably one of the best leaders that ever existed in society outside of Jesus. Um, and he wrote. It was like his personal journal. He wrote, and they took his writings and turned it into a book. And it's meditations on everything you can imagine, from him being a king, to, to his end, and talking about family life during his time, decisions he had to make, and just you get to see a man going through his own hardship and talking about it and trying to make a sense of the world. And the advice is there, so timeless, um, so powerful. I'd recommend getting a. It's very small. It's not too big, and it's something that you want to go back to consistently. So, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. All right, so those are like the top 9 books that I was able to think about in my notes while I was writing this. I'm pretty sure there are a few more books that really were impactful, but these are probably the ones that constantly come up and that I consistently go back to, whether it's every few months or every year. I also have copious amounts of notes that I write in documents to go back to with a simple, click of a button. So highly recommend checking them out. I would love to hear your thoughts if you've read these books in the comment section below to start a conversation, or hopefully you go out, grab one of the books, and we can start a conversation once you're done. So looking forward to hearing from y'all, and until tomorrow.